Hey everybody, what's going on? We are here at the River Safari at the Singapore Zoo to talk about a camera system that you have probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of videos on. So we're not going to talk about video. We're going to talk about photography. That's right, here's the Canon R5 with the 70-200. I also have the 35 1.4 EF lens and the RF 50 1.2. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about the usability of this camera when it comes to animal photography, because we're here at the zoo. Why not shoot animals, right? As well as shooting people, and just my overall thoughts on this camera system. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Canon Singapore for helping us with this video. But these are my thoughts only. With that, let's talk about the R5. Now, we did a first impressions video a few weeks back, and we'll put a link in the description below where you can click here to watch that if you want to, but I just recommend just staying here for a little bit. And, you know, when the R5 was announced, all of us in this industry were just, our jaws dropped. Of course, having 8K and, 12 frames per second mechanical shutter, 20 frames per second electronic shutter, you have basically a high resolution 1DX camera in a small package with 8K video was kind of a game changer, and it is in a lot of ways. But Canon positioned this camera, at least at the beginning, video first, photography second. And that's not the R5. The R5 is a photographer's camera that does good video, but it's a photographer's camera first and foremost. And that's one of the things I really discovered using this over the past couple weeks, is that it just works. Canon has really nailed the R system down, and I think the R5 and the R6, which we'll review later on in another video. I mean, some people might say Canon should have been at this level at the beginning, but I think it took them some time to really embrace the mirrorless medium, and they have with spades. This is just such a joy to use. Now, for my initial impressions of the camera, I didn't really get that much usage out of it. I had 10 minutes in an office, so while it was, I was excited at the same time, but after I got to use it, some of the standout features, at least on the body front of it, of course, is the EVF. It's a high resolving EVF, 5.76 million dot EVF. It is beautiful. The higher refresh rate is fantastic. Yes, it will drain your battery a little bit more, but it's like looking through an optical viewfinder, but it's much brighter. And I think for a lot of wildlife photographers and sports photographers out there, you're going to really enjoy this. And if you're a little bit apprehensive and you're married to your optical viewfinder, give the R5 a chance. I think it's going to change your mind. Also, the fully articulating rotatable display is fantastic. We saw that on the EOS R. It's here in the R5. The touchscreen is very responsive, especially if you want to focus with the touchscreen. It is super fast. I mean, Canon has nailed the touchscreen down with this. There's really nothing to say, but this thing is really, really that good. And especially focusing with it, how fast you can move your focusing points around the display with your thumb. I mean, it's better than a joystick, honestly, and it's very, very precise. Besides that, though, it's very much like the EOS R in its design. Now, initially, I thought the R5, being at a certain price point and being the flagship mirrorless camera, would have that kind of 1DX build quality to it. Now, it doesn't. It's more of the EOS R, but I was hoping it would have more of that robustness to this feel of the camera. Not a deal breaker, but you know what I mean? I wanted, because whenever you pick up a 1DX, right, it's like you pick up this camera and it just feels so good, and it feels like no matter where you go in the world with this camera, it's going to withstand the harshest conditions. The R5, I mean, I wouldn't want to drop it as many times as I could drop a 1DX. I mean, it will withstand some, but I do understand because of the processor inside of this, because of what it's doing with 8K video and all that kind of heat, they want to make it as lightweight as possible. I get that, but it would have been nice to see a little bit more robustness out of the build quality out of this, but it's not a deal breaker. Anyway, that's it for the outside. Let's talk about what it's like to use. As soon as you start using it, is actually how fast this camera is. Of course, it's got that Digic X processor in it, so it's really got a lot of the 1DX Mark III DNA inside of this camera. Then you got the dual pixel autofocus 2 system, which is better than the 1DX3, and it's in an R5 with a 45 megapixels full frame sensor. And you don't usually see higher resolution full frame sensors producing this kind of speed and this kind of accuracy with your photos. You just don't see it. And that's something that you've just gotten used to over the past couple of years, but Canon sort of redefined what you can do with a higher megapixel full frame sensor. And the R5 performs beautifully. It is lightning quick. Autofocusing is some of the fastest I've ever seen. I mean, a lot of people compare it to the Sony, and rightfully so, but not to the Sony a7R4s, but to the Sony A9 and A9 II, and it's neck and neck there. But of course, the star of the show is the eye tracking, and that's where this camera shines. Here at the zoo with animals, I have shots of me shooting lions and tigers and even a peacock, and it just locks on the eye. Let's talk about ISO for a moment, because when you have a higher megapixel full frame sensor, sometimes the trade-off is, yes, you get a high resolution image, but low light photography, it suffers. More noise, more grain, doesn't look as good. But I gotta tell you, Canon's done a tremendous job with the R5 in this regard. I've tested with other cameras, like neck and neck, with the same focal length, same aperture, and I notice if I use auto ISO that the ISO on the R5 is a lot less than on other cameras. So they're not so aggressive, but that means you get a much cleaner image. But even in lower light situations, I'm finding that the image is very, very usable. Even at over 6400 ISO, no issues at all. But that depends what you consider usable. Now, if you're gonna use this for, let's say, a photography exhibition and print it out, maybe you wanna lower the ISO a little bit. But if you're just gonna use social media or for the web, no issues at all. This camera is really good at low light photography. So let's talk about battery life on the R5 and overheating. Now, video aside, because I think Canon's gonna address some of that with a future firmware update that might be out by the time that this review's out there, so it'd be null and void if I talked about it anyway for video. But in terms of photography, I haven't experienced that overheating that others have. But the way I do my photography might be different from them, and the reason is that I turn off the camera between shots. So if I'm here, I see something, I shoot. When I'm done, I turn off the camera. I walk, I see something, I shoot, I turn off the camera. I don't leave the camera on. Yes, there's there's a power saving mode in this that does shut off the camera, but I don't even allow that to come into play. I just manually turn it off. That's how I learned photography back in the day, because battery life back then was never that great, so just turn off the camera when you're not using it to conserve battery. And that's exactly what I do. And as a result, I don't need to charge this battery that much. I think once every 3 days, and I've been shooting with this camera regularly over the past week and a half, 2 weeks. And I'm shooting hundreds of shots at a time. I'm trying to shoot my dog at the dog park, or I'm here at the zoo, or I'm in various different locations, and no issues at all with that. So I haven't experienced those things, but again, depends how you use any camera system. So if you are experiencing that with your R5, try my method, turn off the camera between your shots. It might save you some battery life and some headache as well. The image quality out of this camera is slightly different from previous Canon cameras that you might have shot with in the past. And it's not bad. It's just obviously a more refined image, because you're talking about 45 megapixels along with these RF lenses, which are very sharp, high resolving lenses. So you get a little bit of a different look. I would say it's clinical, but yet it has character to it. But it feels a little bit more, I don't know how to put it. You'll see it in the images as we show you here in the video, but it has a little bit of a different look that I'm used to seeing. And it's still very easy to edit. You still get those great Canon colors, but it's a little bit more refined. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, refined. And when you see how good these lenses are with this sensor, then you realize what Canon has done with the RF system. When the EOS R came out, people were saying, why are they making such expensive lenses? They're so big, they're so, all these things. But now, you see the engineering coming to fruition. These are some of the sharpest images I've seen out of a full frame camera system to date. This RF system is no joke. Now, let's talk about lenses. All right, let's talk about this lens here. This is the 70-200 RF variant f2.8. Now, I have used the EF 70-200 in a couple reviews already, the 1DX Mark III and the 1DX Mark II. I love that lens. This lens is better optically. It is a fantastic lens, but it is different in its design. Some things I like and some things I don't. First off, it is very compact for 70-200. As you can see, take off the hood, easy to store into a bag, doesn't take up a lot of space. But telescopic zoom, and you have to twist it quite a bit to get to 200 on that. I prefer an internal zoom. Some people don't mind it, but it's all about the image quality, right? And the image quality is really good. However, and this is a note for you guys out there, if you haven't updated the firmware on this lens and you do have the R5, please do so. There was an update about a week from this time of the recording of this review that has improved the handling and the ability of this lens greatly. The IS inside of it was a little shaky, autofocus was a little bit here nor there. After that update, it was a lot better. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much precise. I mean, I point the camera where I want to shoot. I mean, the system inside the camera recognizes the object or the person or the animal, fire away, and you got some really sharp images. Can't say enough about this lens. It's really, really that good. And with all these RF lenses, I've talked about this in many different reviews already. They're some of the best out there. The 70-200 does not disappoint in the least. Now, the next lens on the R5 is the 51.2. Now, I have talked about this lens in my two EOS R reviews and the RP. It is one of my favorite 50 lenses on the market to date. Canon has done a tremendous job with the 51.2. If you've never shot with this lens, please go to a store, ask a friend, rent it, try it. It is amazing, and especially how fast the autofocus is at 1.2. It's really one of those lenses that just is gonna blow your mind when you see it. It's beautiful how it renders. And I always thought to myself, after even trying it with the EOS R and the RP, I'm going, wait till Canon comes out with a higher resolution sensor because this lens is going to shine. And it does, it really does. I mean, Canon's got a lot of great RF lenses right now. Now, they don't have a lot, but they have a lot of good ones. The 51.2, if you need one prime lens, the 51.2 is the one to get. It's not cheap, but trust me, once you use it, you're gonna have a hard time going back to another 50 after this. Because at 1.2 it's sharp, at f2 it's sharp. You wanna stop it down even more, it gets even sharper. It's just a fantastic lens overall. And autofocusing speed, everything is great on the R5. There's nothing more to say than you gotta try this lens. It really is that good. Now, if you keep wondering why I'm leaning into poles this entire review, it's because it's quite windy outside and the microphone, so Jay's like, please lean against the pole. That's what I'm doing here. Anyway, talking about the last lens I have for the EOS R, and that is the 35-1.4 EF variant. And I know why you guys love this lens so much. I've been wanting to test it out on various different Canon reviews I've done. I kept asking Canon Singapore, I'm like, guys, please let me try the 35-1.4. They kept telling me, Bobby, it's not available, it's not available. I think they gave me a new lens for this review because it looks brand new. And now I know why people love this lens. It is so sharp, it is so beautiful on the R5. It resolves this lens beautifully on it. I mean, guys, I get it, I get it. It's one of my favorite 35s I've used. And if you're worried about autofocus, don't. It's as quick as the RF version. But I can tell you, if Canon makes an RF version of this lens, look out. Anyway, I'm a fan, as you can tell, but enough about lenses. Let's go into Lightroom. Now let's look at the images I shot with the R5 with the various different lenses, talk about my experience, and my final thoughts after that. Okay guys, we're now in Lightroom taking a look at images I shot with the R5 with the three lenses I mentioned in this review, the RF 70-200 f2.8, the RF 50-1.2, and the EF 35-1.4. I'm just gonna show you some examples and so you guys can see the before and after and the overall image quality with RF and EF lenses. This is with the RF 51.2. This guy was playing some beautiful music on his guitar with some friends at the curbside. I asked if I could take his photo. He said yes. Really like this shot. Now, this is what it looked like before. Straight out of camera, raw. I do not shoot JPEG at all. I only shoot in raw. And as you can tell, the colors are a little bit more muted. And that's something that I noticed in the R5 over the EOS R and other Canon cameras. They're a little bit more muted and it's a little bit underexposed. It feels like this to me. And when I checked my settings, everything was level, but that's something that I noticed with the R5 a little bit more, but it's so easy to edit with Canon colors and files that with a few adjustments, we have this. This might be to your liking or not. I like a little bit, I like that punch of red and a little punch of orange to the skin tone. I think it just livens up the image a bit, to each their own, but I'm really happy with this image. Okay, let's take a look at some other portrait shots here I have. This is my friend Steven here. We were doing a portrait session with him. And I was trying various different lenses, the 70-200, the 51-2, but the 51-2 is just a great overall lens. Between the 85 and the 50, I find the 50 much more usable because of obviously it's a, shorter focal length, but it's just got great separation from the subjects to the background. Now this has been edited, of course. This was the before and after. And as you can tell, it's a little bit more muted. Did clean up the skin tone a bit, warmed it up, smoothing out some stuff, but really happy with this overall image. This is at ISO 100 at 1/125th of a second on the shutter speed. Now let's take a look at a couple more shots here, just because of the 51-2 is just a great lens. Look at this, tack sharp, boom. The RF lenses come alive on the R5 sensor, trust me. If you thought that they were decent on the EOS R and the RP, wait till you get a hold of this camera. You're going to be absolutely blown away. Now let's take a look at animal eye tracking. This is one of the big features of the R5. Actually, it's one of my favorite features of the R5. It's a fast camera. I mean, there's a lot of great features about the R5, but animal tracking really impressed me. Case in point, here's a cheetah. It caught the eye right there. This is at ISO 1600, but look how good it's controlled here. Let me show you the before and after, okay? Before, after, before, after. Very usable image. Very happy with this. And the power of the eye tracking. If you think it just works on cheetahs, no, it works on hyenas too. Now this is a little bit of a scary photo, and I sort of edited it to be a bit more scary. Now, as you can tell, it's not super sharp, but just the whole vibe of this image is a bit creepy. ISO 640, 168 millimeters. I was shooting this with the 70-200 f2.8 at 1/500th of a second. This is the TIFF file. This is the RAW file, and I'll show you what it looks like unedited. This is unedited. Pull that out real quick for you so you can see that. I got rid of this little red string there because I didn't like the way it looked. Look at that. I wanted to give that sort of eerie vibe to the image, and I think I pulled it off. I don't think I'd put this in my house or anywhere else, but yeah, I really liked how it turned out. White tiger, locked on that eye like a sniper. Look at that, absolutely beautiful. Very happy with this image. Before, after, before, after. Actually, I think I probably over-edited that image a bit, but edits are a personal choice, but I think I might need to redo that one. Okay, let's take a look at some action shots. Now, here's an interesting thing about the RF 70-200 f2.8, and I mentioned it in the review, is that if you haven't updated the lens, please do so, especially if you have the R5, because it wasn't playing nicely with the R5 in the very beginning. Kai Huang and myself were testing it out with me cycling, and we weren't able to really get sharp shots on, tracking me, which should not be an issue at all. Case in point, look at that. Looks like there's some camera shake there. But we're at ISO 400, 200 millimeters, f2.8, 1/1000th of a second. This should be tack sharp. It wasn't. So one of the things that the update did was really improve the stabilization of the lens. It just improved the overall quality of the lens with the R5, and it really turned out to be a much better use case scenario. Case in point, look at that, tack sharp. That's with the peacock moving around, and I was able to grab it. With me cycling, not so good before the update. So do update your lenses. Please be aware of that. Let's take a look at the EF 3514. I like this lens a lot. I get why people really like this lens. It has a cinematic look to it. It's not the sharpest lens out there, especially because it's an EF and the RF lenses are much sharper, but I like the way it renders. Here's Steven once again. I did a black and white on this one, and look at it. I mean, it's, again, this is through a reflection in a mirror. Well, look at this, is pretty sharp. Very impressive for an EF lens. I just love the way the fall off happens here. Just a very organic looking image coming out of the 3512. So here's a landscape shot with the 3514 as well. Now this has been edited. I'm gonna show you what it looked like prior to the edit. This was at sunset at the River Safari. So, I've got this sun kind of peeking through the trees and the bushes there, and they were almost black, but you want to talk about that dynamic range, not bad. I was able to rescue a lot of this, and there's some pretty good detail in here as well. So again, turns out to be a very usable image. This is an ISO 200, 1/1600th of a second. This is at ISO 200, 1/1600th of a second. The shutter speed might be a little bit too high on this, but I was shooting at f1.4, so the camera was doing the adjustments on that. I just kept it at aperture priority, but I probably want to bring that shutter speed down just a bit to capture more detail and get it a little bit more sharper. Okay, and that's pretty much the R5. Overall, I'm really happy with the quality of the images coming out of the R5 in these 3 lenses, I have to say. I mean, just from these samples alone, I'm excited to get this camera back and shoot with it more, because I think I can even do more with it with having more time in my hands and just really getting to learn the nuances of the camera. 2 weeks is usually not enough with any camera review that we have, but that's usually all we get. And because the R5 is so popular, other people need to use it. So hopefully in the future, I can get a hold of it and try it and play with it some more. Final thoughts on the R5. I've really enjoyed using it. It's a great tool. I mean, it's such a refined camera from the EOS R in a lot of different ways. And I really enjoy the EOS R as well. You saw probably a couple of my reviews already. And the R5 is just better in pretty much every single way. Now, in terms of the autofocusing system, I think it's like one firmware update away from being phenomenal. It's really, really good right now, but I've had some instances where it likes to go off and focus on something else for, I have no reason why. I don't know why, but 80 to 90% of my shots are relatively in focus. And in some ways, it's also going to put a dent into the 1DX Mark III sales, because it is like a higher resolution 1DX3 in a lot of ways. I mean, the speed, 12 frames per second mechanical, 20 frames per second, electronic shutter, the autofocusing system, all that stuff. It's really going to make people think twice about the 1DX, unless you need a camera that is so durable and so robust that you can take it anywhere. Yeah, then the 1DX3, but if you're going to be in a pretty safe area, I mean, this can do pretty much what the 1DX can do, and it's mirrorless as well. Price point on the camera. This is one of the areas where I feel that, I understand in one aspect why Canon did it, because of the 8K video and the 4K HQ and 4K 120 and all that kind of stuff. But I do wish it was at least $500 to $1,000 less expensive. I think that would be really competitive for Canon to do. And I'm sure that down the road there will be incentives or rebates or packages they put together with the camera system. Because for Singapore here, I mean, just the body alone is over $6,000. And then if you put a lens on top of it, you're looking at 8,000 Singapore dollars for one lens and a body. And, for a Canon system, that's quite a bit of money. But it's one of those things where you go, if it was just a little bit less, I think they'd sell even more. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the R5. It's a fantastic camera system. I think for those who have the opportunity to get this camera and to use it, you're really going to enjoy it. I know I have, and yeah, can't wait to test it more in the future. With that, guys, be safe out there. Follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. We will chat to you really, really soon. Take care.